The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched wider than any building on Earth. 12 alien races sat in their curved seats, looking down at the single human who stood in the center of the room. Admiral Dongwu Kim kept his back straight, and his eyes forward. He would not bow to them, not even now. The voice of the council speaker echoed through the hall. It was a being called a Vorthak, tall and thin with 4 arms and skin like gray stone. Humanity has been found guilty of crimes against galactic peace, it said. You have expanded too fast. You have built too many weapons. You refuse to follow our rules. Dongwu felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept quiet. Behind him sat Dr. Haewon Park, the human ambassador. She had tried for months to make the council understand. Humans were not violent by nature. They were explorers. They were builders. But the aliens saw only what they wanted to see. The council has decided, the speaker continued. Humanity will be removed from galactic space. Your solar system will be sealed. No human ship will leave. No alien ship will enter. This barrier will last for 10,000 years. 10,000 years. Dongwu thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was only 5 years old. She would be dead for thousands of years before this punishment ended. So would her children, and their children, and countless generations after them. Do you have anything to say before we begin? The speaker asked. Dongwu stepped forward. Yes, he said, his voice calm and clear. You think you are protecting the galaxy from us, but you are making the biggest mistake in your history. The aliens shifted in their seats. Some made sounds that might have been laughter. The speakers. 4 eyes blinked slowly. Explain. You see our ships and think we are warriors. You see our growth and think we are greedy. But you do not see what we really are. Dongwu looked up at each of the 12 races. We are problem solvers. When you give us a problem, we do not accept it. We fix it. And you have just given us the biggest problem we have ever faced. 10,000 years in a cage, one of the council members said. It was a creature that looked like a giant insect. Your kind will be extinct long before the barrier falls. Maybe, Dongwu said. Or maybe we will surprise you. The speaker raised one of its hands. Enough. The vote has been taken. The sentence will begin now. Far away from the council hall, Captain Jamin Lee sat on the bridge of his ship, the New Horizon. His crew watched their screens as strange lights began to form around the edge of their solar system. The barrier was starting. Captain, his communications officer said, we are getting emergency signals from Earth. All ships are ordered to return home immediately. Jamin nodded. He had expected this. For the past week, every human ship in space had been racing back to Earth. Most had made it. Some had not. Those unlucky crews would spend the rest of their lives as exiles, cut off from their families forever. Set course for Earth, Jamin ordered. Full speed. The New Horizon turned and flew toward the growing wall of energy. Behind them, the lights grew brighter and brighter. Soon they would meet in the middle, and humanity would be trapped. On Earth, President Mi-young Choi stood before a crowd of reporters. The questions came fast and angry. How could this happen? Why did humanity have to be so aggressive? What would they do now? We will survive, Mi-young said simply. That is what humans do. We adapt. We overcome. We find a way. But inside she felt the weight of the disaster. 8 billion people trapped in one solar system forever. No more exploration. No more growth. No more reaching for the stars. In a laboratory in Seoul, physicist Woo Jin Nam turned off the news and went back to his calculations. While everyone else panicked, he was thinking. The aliens had built a barrier around their solar system. But what exactly was this barrier? How did it work? And more importantly, how could it be beaten? Woo Jin had spent his life studying the deepest secrets of space and time. He knew that every barrier had weaknesses. Every prison had flaws. The aliens thought they were locking humanity away. But they had also given humanity something precious. Time to think. Outside his window, he could see the first signs of the barrier in the night sky. It looked like a faint aurora dancing across the stars. Soon it would be complete, and Earth would be alone. But Wu Jin smiled as he worked. The aliens had made an assumption. They thought that being trapped in space meant being trapped completely. They did not understand that humans had always been best when they were cornered, when they had no choice but to be clever. The barrier finished forming 3 hours later. Captain Jamin had made it through just in time. He was the last human to see the galaxy beyond their prison, but he was not the last human who would matter to that galaxy. As the wall of energy completed its circle around their solar system, humanity faced the greatest challenge in their history. 10,000 years of exile. 10,000 years to either die out quietly or to become something the galaxy had never seen before. In the days that followed, some people despaired. Some people gave up. But others, like Wu Jin Nam, like President Mi Young Choi, like Admiral Dongwoo Kim, began to plan. They had been given 10,000 years. They would use every single one of them. The Galactic Council thought they had solved their human problem. They thought they had put the dangerous species safely away where they could not cause trouble. They would learn in time that they had done something very different. They had given humanity exactly what it needed to transcend everything the galaxy thought was possible. The exile had begun, but so had humanity's greatest transformation. 100 years had passed since the barrier trapped humanity in their solar system. The generation that remembered life before the exile was mostly gone. But their children and grandchildren had not forgotten the promise their leaders had made. Humanity would not simply survive, they would thrive. Director Kyung Ho Yoon stood on the observation deck of the Mars Central Command, looking out at the red planet that no longer looked red. The entire surface was covered with silver structures and glowing energy lines. Massive towers reached up toward the thin atmosphere, collecting solar energy and cosmic radiation. Deep tunnels went down to the planet's core, where fusion reactors provided power for the growing civilization. The Mercury project is ahead of schedule, his assistant reported. They have completed 70% of the solar collection array. Kyung Ho nodded. Mercury, the planet closest to the sun, was being turned into a giant energy collector. Billions of mirrors and solar panels covered its surface, gathering the raw power that humanity needed for their great work. The energy was then beamed to other planets through focused light streams. But energy was only part of the plan. The real work was happening in the laboratories and workshops scattered across every planet and moon in the solar system. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, Dr. So Young Han walked through the Genetic Research Center. The building was carved deep into the ice, protected from radiation and cold. Inside, her team was working on the most important project in human history, changing humanity itself. "Show me the latest results," So Young said to her lead researcher. The young man, Tae Hyun Shin, pulled up images on the wall screen. "The neural interface project is working better than we hoped," he said. "Test subjects can now process information 50 times faster than normal humans. Their reaction times are almost instant." So Young studied the brain scans. The test subjects had been volunteers, brave men and women who wanted to help humanity evolve. Tiny machines had been placed in their brains, connecting their thoughts directly to computers. The results were amazing. "What about the physical modifications?" she asked. Taehyun switched to another set of images. "The genetic changes are stable. New generations of children can survive in vacuum for short periods. Their bones are stronger. Their muscles are more efficient. They need less food and can go longer without sleep." So Young felt pride and worry at the same time. They were changing what it meant to be human, but they had no choice. If humanity was going to survive 10,000 years in this prison, they needed to become something more than they were. Far away on Mars, engineer Bo-Ram Oh was working on an even more ambitious project. She stood at the control center of the Great Accelerator, a massive machine that circled the entire planet. The tunnel was 3 meters wide and went all the way around Mars's equator, a distance of over 20,000 kilometers. "Particle stream is stable," one of her technicians reported. "Energy levels holding at maximum," said another. Bo-Ram watched the readings carefully. Inside the tunnel, particles were being accelerated to incredible speeds, faster than anything had ever moved before. When they crashed into special targets, they created tiny tears in space itself. These tears lasted only microseconds, but they proved something important. The basic structure of reality could be broken and reshaped. The project was officially called Advanced Physics Research. But Boram and her team knew the real purpose. They were trying to punch holes in the barrier that trapped them. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, master strategist Young-Soo Kang floated in zero gravity, looking at a three-dimensional map of the solar system. Every asteroid, every moon, every planet was marked with symbols showing mines, factories, and research stations. Humanity had turned their prison into the most advanced industrial complex in the galaxy. But Young-Soo was not thinking about the present. He was thinking about the future. His job was to plan for time periods that were hard to imagine. What would humanity need in 1,000 years? In 5,000? In 10,000? The long game protocol is working, he said to his assistant. Each generation builds on the work of the last. Knowledge is preserved. Technology advances. We are not just surviving the exile. We are using it. His assistant, a young woman named Jin-A Wu, looked at the long-term charts. The population models show we will reach 50 billion people by year 3000, she said. The resource calculations show we can support them all. Young-Soo nodded. Other species might have panicked at being trapped. Humans had done the opposite. They had turned their solar system into a nursery for the largest population they had ever supported. More people meant more minds working on the problems, more creativity, more chances for breakthrough discoveries. On Pluto, at the very edge of the solar system, Dr. Yoon-Ji Lim worked in a laboratory so cold that most humans could not survive there even with protective suits. But Yoon-Ji was one of the modified humans, genetically changed to work in extreme conditions. She was studying the barrier itself. Every day she sent tiny probes toward the wall of energy that trapped them. Most were destroyed instantly. But some sent back data before they died, and that data was precious. I think I understand how it works, she told her research team during their weekly meeting. The barrier does not just block physical objects. It twists space itself. Our solar system is still in the same place, but it is disconnected from the rest of the galaxy. Her team leaned forward, excited. If they understood the barrier, maybe they could defeat it. But there is something interesting, Yoon-Ji continued. The barrier is not perfect. It has tiny flaws, places where the energy fluctuates. If we could create the right kind of disturbance, we might be able to open a small hole. That night, Yoon-Ji worked alone in her laboratory. She had been trying, for months, to create a stable wormhole, a tunnel through space that could bypass the barrier. Most attempts failed completely. A few created energy bursts that damaged her equipment. But on this night, something different happened. As her machines hummed and sparked, a tiny point of light appeared in the air. It was smaller than a pinhead and lasted only 0.003 of a second. But in that brief moment, Yoon-Ji's instruments detected something impossible. A connection to space outside the barrier. She had done it. She had opened a hole in the wall that trapped humanity. It was tiny and brief, but it was real. And if she could do it once, she could do it again. Bigger, longer, strong enough to matter. Yoon-Ji looked out her laboratory window at the stars beyond the barrier. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council believed they had solved their human problem. They thought humanity was locked away, slowly dying in their small prison. They had no idea what was really happening. Humanity was not dying. They were transforming. They were becoming something new, something powerful, something that would change the galaxy forever. The exile was supposed to be a punishment, but humanity was turning it into their greatest opportunity. And they still had 9,900 years to go. 3,000 years had passed since the exile began. Humanity had changed so much that the original humans would barely recognize their descendants. Chief Scientist In-Ho Seo stood in a laboratory that existed in 7 dimensions at once, watching. His team worked with tools that bent reality itself. In-Ho no longer looked entirely human. His eyes glowed with a soft blue light, enhanced with cybernetic implants that let him see across multiple spectrums of light and energy. His brain had been modified with quantum processors that could think at the speed of light. His body was stronger than steel, but could still feel every emotion as deeply as any human before him. "The artificial dimension is stable," reported his lead researcher. "We can maintain it for up to 6 hours now." Inho smiled. 6 hours was an eternity compared to their first success, which had lasted only microseconds. The artificial dimensions were pocket universes that humanity had learned to create, small spaces where they could change the basic laws of physics. In one dimension, time moved faster. In another, gravity worked differently. In a third, the speed of light was not a limit. "Excellent," Inho said. "Begin the next phase. I want to see if we can link 3 dimensions together." These pocket universes had become humanity's secret weapon in their race against time. Inside the fast-time dimensions, scientists could spend years working on problems, while only minutes passed in the real world. Entire research projects that should have taken centuries were completed in days. On the other side of the solar system, Hyojin Moon prepared for another expedition into the dimensional spaces. She no longer needed a spaceship to travel between worlds. Her body had been so heavily modified that she could survive in the vacuum of space, fly between planets using built-in propulsion systems, and exist in dimensions where normal matter could not function. Hyojin's team consisted of 12 other enhanced humans, each one a specialist in exploring impossible places. Together, they had mapped over 200 artificial dimensions and learned to navigate the strange physics that governed each one. "Today we investigate Dimension 247, Hyojin told her team as they gathered in the launch chamber. "Preliminary scans show that conscious thought can directly affect matter there. We need to understand how this works." They stepped through a shimmering portal and disappeared from normal space. Inside Dimension 247, they found themselves in a realm where thinking about something could make it real. Hyojin thought about a flower and a perfect rose appeared in her hand. One of her team members imagined a small moon, and a sphere of rock materialized above them. But they quickly learned that this dimension was dangerous. Negative thoughts could create monsters. Fear could become a physical force that attacked them. They had to maintain perfect mental discipline or risk being destroyed by their own minds. After 6 hours of careful exploration, they returned to normal space with valuable data. The dimension showed that consciousness and reality were connected in ways that conventional science had never imagined. This knowledge would be crucial for humanity's future plans. Meanwhile, architect Sungmin Ryu was designing the first trans-dimensional cities. These were structures that existed in multiple realities at the same time, connected by corridors that passed through artificial dimensions. A person could walk from their home in normal space, through a doorway, and find themselves in a dimension where time moved at a different speed. The first city, called New Seoul, was built around Earth's moon. From the outside, it looked like a collection of silver domes and spires. But inside, it contained neighborhoods that existed in dozens of different dimensions. The residential areas were in slow-time dimensions, where families could spend decades together while only hours passed in the outside world. The industrial areas were in fast-time dimensions, where manufacturing could happen at incredible speed. Children grew up playing in dimensions where they could fly, where gravity was optional, where they could practice skills that would be impossible in normal reality. They learned to think in ways that previous generations of humans could never have imagined. The breakthrough that changed everything came from Dr. Da-Yun Kim, a temporal physicist who had spent 50 years studying the nature of time itself. She made a discovery that shocked even her enhanced mind. Consciousness could reach backward through time. "We always thought of time as a river flowing in one direction," Da-Yun explained to the scientific council. "But consciousness is different. It exists at all points in its timeline simultaneously. A sufficiently trained mind can influence events in its own past." The implications were staggering. If humans could affect their own past, they could essentially rewrite history. They could prevent disasters before they happened. They could ensure that crucial discoveries were made exactly when they were needed. Da-Yun's first experiment was simple, but profound. She focused her consciousness on a moment from the previous day when a research experiment had failed. Using techniques that merged advanced technology with pure mental discipline, she reached back through time and made a tiny adjustment to the experiment's setup. In the present, the record suddenly showed that the experiment had succeeded. Reality had been changed retroactively, and only Darwin remembered that it had ever been different. Admiral Junho Park, great-grandson of the original ambassador Dr. Haewon Park, understood immediately what this meant for humanity's future. If they could fight battles across time itself, they would be unstoppable. He began training the first temporal strike forces, soldiers who could exist in multiple time periods at once. These warriors learned to fight in ways that were impossible to defend against. They could attack an enemy in the past before the enemy knew they existed. They could prevent their own defeats by changing the circumstances that led to them. They could be killed in battle, and then alter the timeline so that the battle never happened. The training was conducted in artificial dimensions, where the normal rules of cause and effect were already suspended. Soldiers learned to think of themselves, not as beings who existed at one point in time, but as entities spread across their entire timeline. They could act in the past, present, and future simultaneously. As the 3,000th year of exile ended, humanity had achieved something that the Galactic Council had declared impossible. They had transcended the basic limitations of physics. They had learned to create their own realities, to manipulate time itself, to exist in multiple dimensions at once. But they were still trapped behind the barrier. The wall of energy that surrounded their solar system remained as strong as ever. However, this was no longer seen as a limitation. It was now viewed as protection, a shield that kept their enemies from discovering what humanity had become. The Galactic Council, monitoring their prison from a safe distance, noticed unusual energy readings from the human solar system. But their instruments could not penetrate the barrier to see what was happening inside. Their scientists dismissed the readings as equipment malfunctions. After all, the primitive humans could not possibly have developed technology more advanced than their own. They were making the same mistake they had made 3,000 years ago. They underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to grow, to become something entirely new when faced with impossible challenges. Inside the barrier, humanity continued their great work. They had learned to master space and time and consciousness itself. But these were just tools for an even greater purpose. They were preparing to become the shepherds of the entire galaxy, whether the galaxy wanted them or not. The year was 9,999 of the exile. Only one more year remained before the barrier around humanity's solar system would finally fail. But Grand Admiral Chan Wu Li was not waiting for that day. He stood in the command center of the temporal fleet, watching displays that showed the entire galaxy across all of time. Chan Wu no longer looked human at all. His body was composed of organized energy held in a human shape. His consciousness existed simultaneously in millions of different moments, allowing him to experience the past, present, and future as one continuous reality. When he spoke, his words echoed across multiple dimensions. "Begin Operation Recursive Storm," he commanded. Throughout the solar system, temporal gates opened. These were not the simple portals that connected different dimensions. These were tiers in time itself, passages that led not to different places, but to different moments in history. Through these gates, humanity's temporal fleet began to deploy across the galaxy's entire timeline. Commander Eugene Cho led the first mission. Her ship, the Causality's Edge, slipped through a temporal gate and emerged in the galaxy's past, 3,000 years before humanity had even developed space travel. Her target was a massive asteroid that, according to historical records, had destroyed an entire civilization. But Eugene was not there to watch history unfold. She was there to change it. The Kelvani species had been a peaceful race of artists and philosophers. Their homeworld orbited a star in the Andromeda sector, and they had just begun to explore their own solar system when the asteroid appeared. It was the size of a small moon, moving so fast that their primitive technology could not stop it. Eugene's ship intercepted the asteroid while it was still days away from the Kelvani world. Using weapons that could manipulate matter at the quantum level, she simply deleted the asteroid from existence. One moment it was there, a mountain of rock and ice hurtling toward disaster. The next moment, there was only empty space. The Kelvani never knew how close they had come to extinction. Their civilization flourished for the next several thousand years, eventually becoming one of the founding members of the Galactic Council. But they never learned that their entire species owed its existence to a human ship that had traveled backward through time to save them. Similar missions were happening throughout the galaxy's history. Commander Taiwan Sung prevented a plague that would have killed billions of the insectoid chitin race. Captain Unsu Zhang stopped a solar flare from sterilizing the homeworld of the crystalline harmonics. Lieutenant Bo Kyung-ro guided a lost generation ship of the aquatic depths to a new world after their original planet died. Each intervention was carefully planned and precisely executed. The humans left no trace of their involvement. To the aliens, these were miraculous rescues, lucky accidents, or natural phenomena that somehow worked in their favor. They never suspected that their saviors were members of a species that, from their perspective, had not even evolved yet. Dr. Seungjin Baek worked in a research station that existed outside of normal time, monitoring the changes that rippled through history. His job was to ensure that humanity's interventions did not create paradoxes or unintended consequences. The timeline is stable, he reported to the Temporal Command. All interventions have been integrated successfully. The galactic civilization is developing exactly as planned. Sung Jin had access to records that would have amazed the Galactic Council. Every major technological advancement made by the 12 species had been subtly guided by human influence. When the Vorthak developed faster-than-light travel, they had been inspired by mysterious energy readings that were actually human ships operating in the distant future. When the Chitin created their first artificial intelligence, they had based it on mathematical principles they found carved into an ancient asteroid, principles that had been placed there by human time travelers. The most significant intervention had happened during the formation of the Galactic Council itself. The 12 species had been on the verge of a devastating war when mysterious mediators appeared at their peace negotiations. These mediators spoke all languages fluently, understood every culture perfectly, and proposed solutions that satisfied everyone involved. The aliens never realized that their perfect mediators were humans in disguise, using advanced technology to appear as members of their own species. The peace treaty that created the Galactic Council had been written by human diplomats who knew exactly what each species needed to hear. But the greatest revelation came when Seungjin analyzed the technology that the Council had used to create humanity's prison. The barrier around Earth's solar system was incredibly advanced, requiring scientific principles that should have taken the aliens millions of years to develop. The barrier technology, Seungjin said during a briefing to the Temporal Command, was developed by the Vorthak only after they discovered certain quantum principles in an ancient ruin on their third moon. I have traced the origin of those ruins. They were built by Commander Park Haiwan in the year 7847 of our exile. The implication was staggering. Humanity had traveled into the past and given the aliens the very technology they would later use to imprison humanity. They had created their own exile. Grand Admiral Chan Wu studied the temporal maps, understanding finally dawning in his enhanced consciousness. "We were never trapped," he said. "We trapped ourselves deliberately. The exile was not a punishment. It was an incubation period." The truth was more complex than anyone had imagined. Humanity's most advanced temporal scientists had discovered that becoming a truly transcendent species required isolation. If they had remained part of galactic civilization, they would have been limited by what was considered possible. They would have accepted the conventional boundaries of science and philosophy. But in exile, with no choice but to solve impossible problems or die, humanity had broken through every limitation. They had become something that could not have developed any other way. The barrier that the aliens thought they were using to punish humanity was actually humanity's gift to itself, a necessary cocoon that allowed them to transform from caterpillars into butterflies. As the final year of exile began, temporal monitors throughout the galaxy detected strange disturbances. Scientists of the 12 species noticed that their most fundamental theories about physics were proving incomplete. Technologies that should have been impossible were somehow working. Mathematical equations were resolving in ways that defied their understanding, but they could not trace these anomalies to their source. The humans operating throughout their history were too skilled, too advanced, too careful to be detected by conventional means. The Galactic Council met in emergency session to discuss the mysterious phenomena, but even as they debated what might be causing these strange events, human agents sat among them. Some were disguised as trusted advisors. Others appeared as holographic communications from distant worlds. A few had taken positions as cleaning, staff, or security guards, invisible to the self-important council members. They listened as the aliens worried about impossible technologies and unexplained rescues. They smiled as the council tried to understand events that had been carefully orchestrated by humanity across thousands of years. Soon, the barrier would fall. Soon, humanity would officially return to the galaxy. But in truth, they had never left. They had been the secret guardians of galactic civilization for millennia, nurturing it from the shadows, guiding it toward a future that only they could see. The 12 species thought they ruled the galaxy, but they had actually been students in humanity's classroom, learning lessons they did not even know they were being taught. The exile was almost over, but humanity's true mission was just beginning. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was empty when Fleet Admiral Hyunwoo Kim arrived. He walked slowly through the vast chamber where, 10,000 years ago, his ancestor Admiral Dongwoo Kim had stood trial. The curved seats that once held the 12 alien races were vacant. On each seat lay a simple message written in perfect script. "We understand now. We are ready to learn." Hyunwoo no longer needed physical form to exist, but he chose to appear human out of respect for his ancestors. His body was composed of organized energy and quantum consciousness, capable of existing in multiple realities simultaneously. When he smiled, stars in distant galaxies felt the warmth of his emotion. The transformation of the Galactic Council had begun 6 months earlier, when the barrier around humanity's solar system had finally collapsed. The aliens had gathered their fleets expecting to find either a dead solar system or a broken species begging for mercy. Instead, they had found something that challenged everything they thought they knew about existence. Humanity had not simply survived their exile, they had transcended it so completely that the very concepts of space and time bent around their presence. When the first alien scout ships approached Earth, they had found humans waiting for them among the stars, smiling as if they had been expecting visitors for tea. "Welcome," the humans had said, speaking in perfect alien languages that they should not have known. "We have been caring for your civilizations for quite some time. Would you like to see what we have been doing?" The revelation had shattered the aliens' understanding of reality. Every major achievement of their civilizations, every technological breakthrough, every moment of peace in their history, all of it had been secretly guided by humans operating across time itself. They had been children playing in a garden, never realizing that loving parents were watching over them from outside of time. On the homeworld of the Vorthak, their greatest scientists gathered in emergency session. The being who had once served, as the council speaker stood before a room full of confused colleagues trying to explain the impossible. "The humans were never our prisoners," the speaker said, its 4 arms trembling with emotion. "We were theirs. They allowed us to believe we had power over them while they reshaped the entire galaxy according to their design." One of the younger Vorthak raised a question. But why? Why would they do this? The speaker had no answer. How could a primitive species explain motivations that operated on scales of time and consciousness that the aliens could barely imagine? Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on every world. The proud Khitan realized that their greatest military victories had been won with weapons technology that had mysteriously appeared in ancient ruins that human time travelers had built. The artistic harmonics discovered that their most beautiful symphonies had been inspired by mathematical sequences that had been embedded in their genetics by human scientists operating from the future. The aquatic depths found records showing that their first colonies had been established on worlds that had been specifically prepared for them by unknown benefactors who had somehow known exactly what environmental conditions their species needed. Every species faced the same humbling truth. They had never been as independent or as advanced as they believed. Humanity had been shepherding them like a parent guiding children, always present but rarely seen. Philosopher Sujin Yang materialized in the council chamber to address the gathered representatives of the 12 species. She appeared as a figure of pure light, speaking in a voice that reached directly into their minds rather than their ears. "You judged us for being aggressive," she said, her words carrying the weight of 10,000 years of patient love. "But our aggression was growth. You judged us for being unpredictable, but our unpredictability was creativity. You judged us as dangerous, but our danger was unlimited potential." The alien representatives listened in silence. Some wept. Others simply stared in wonder. All of them felt the same emotion, the humbling recognition that they had been students who had tried to punish their teacher. "We do not blame you," Sujin continued. "Every species faces the same choice when they encounter something beyond their understanding. They can either grow to meet it, or they can try to diminish it. You chose to diminish us, and in doing so, you gave us the greatest gift possible, the opportunity to grow beyond all limitations." Minho John, the last living human who had been born before the exile ended, stepped forward to address the council. He was ancient by human standards, over 10,000 years old, but his consciousness had been preserved and enhanced until he existed as living history. "My ancestors stood in this chamber and heard your judgment," he said. "They did not argue. They did not beg. They accepted exile because they understood something that you are only now learning. True power is not the ability to control others. True power is the ability to transcend the need for control." Minho gestured, and the air filled with images showing the galaxy's history from humanity's perspective. The aliens saw themselves as humans had seen them, not as enemies or judges, but as beloved children taking their first steps into a larger universe. "Every species that joins galactic civilization faces the same temptation," Minho explained. "They achieve some level of comfort and safety, and then they stop growing. They begin to fear change. They start to see advancement as threat rather than opportunity. This is what happened to all of you." The images showed how each species had evolved rapidly until they reached space travel, then slowed their development to almost nothing. They had become comfortable with their limitations and began to see those limitations as natural laws rather than temporary obstacles. "But humans chose a different path," Minho continued. "When you offered us membership in your civilization, we would have faced the same choice. We could have accepted your limitations and become like you. Instead, you forced us to find a third option: transcendence." A young Choi, descendant of the president who had addressed humanity during its darkest hour, appeared in the chamber to announce the new order. She existed as a being of pure consciousness, simultaneously present in millions of locations across the galaxy. "The Galactic Council is dissolved," she declared, but her words carried no threat or anger. "It is being replaced by the Eternal Compact, a new form of governance that operates across all possible timelines and realities. The Eternal Compact was humanity's gift to the galaxy, a system where every species could choose their own path to transcendence. Those who wished to remain at their current level of development would be protected and nurtured. Those who wanted to grow beyond their limitations would be guided and supported. And those who chose to transcend physical reality entirely would be welcomed into humanity's expanded consciousness. "We are no longer asking to join your civilization," a young explained. "We are inviting you to join ours, a civilization that exists not just in space but across all possible realities. Not just in the present, but throughout all of time. Not just as separate species, but as facets of a universal consciousness that includes every thinking being." Some of the alien species chose immediately to begin the process of transcendence. Others needed time to consider this overwhelming offer. A few were too afraid of change and asked to remain as they were. Humanity accepted all choices with equal grace. They had learned, during their long exile, that forced evolution was no evolution at all. Each being had to choose their own path to growth. But they also made clear that the galaxy would never again be ruled by fear of advancement. No species would ever again be punished for growing too quickly or reaching too far. The universe was infinite, and there was room for infinite growth. As the former council members departed to carry news of the new reality back to their homeworlds, Hyunwoo Kim stood alone in the great chamber. He thought about his ancestor, who had stood in this same place and promised that humanity would surprise their captors. The surprise had been greater than anyone could have imagined. Humanity had not simply escaped their prison. They had transformed the very nature of existence itself, turning a galaxy ruled by fear into a universe governed by unlimited potential. The journal of Admiral Dong-Woo Kim, which had been floating in space when the barrier collapsed, contained his final entry. We were banished for 10,000 years to teach us humility. Instead, we learned eternity. Humanity's legacy was no longer written in the history of a single species. It was woven into the fabric of reality itself, ensuring that every thinking being in the universe would always have the chance to transcend their limitations and become something greater than they had ever imagined. The exile was over. The transformation of existence had begun, and it would continue forever across all possible realities, guided by the species that had learned to turn punishment into transcendence, prison into opportunity, and limitation into the first step toward infinite growth.